I built a custom laptop entirely from scratch using desktop gaming PC hardware, and this turned out to be the most challenging project of my life. The goal was not to make yet another janky kinda laptop-like DIY project, but a legit laptop that's thin and sleek and looks like something you'd find in the store, and I still can't quite believe how it all came together. From the start, this was clearly going to be a challenge. I wanted it to be fully upgradable with new desktop processors and graphics cards, and I refused to use any parts made for laptops. But that meant figuring out how to cram an entire gaming PC's worth of hardware into a tiny laptop frame, how to build a case that doesn't look like it was made by a drunk toddler, how to keep it from melting down like a nuclear reactor, and how to make a screen, keyboard, and mouse actually work. After plotting this for months, I figured it was time to just get started and wing it along the way. I got an AMD Ryzen 5 5600X, which has a thermal design power of 65 watts, making it relatively efficient. I also snagged a Gigabyte A520i mini ITX motherboard and an XFX RX6600 GPU, which also has pretty low power requirements. After all, I am trying not to create a portable bonfire. Then I quickly hit my first snag. One of the biggest challenges was keeping everything quite thin, and all of the memory modules I could find were about as thin as a brick. It would have been easy to use a low-profile motherboard that takes laptop RAM and even runs off of DC power, but using laptop components goes against the spirit of my challenge, and these motherboards are rare enough that it would be much harder to upgrade it down the road. After searching around, I found these angled DDR4 memory slots, which would have given me plenty of clearance, but there's zero chance of me actually soldering these in place successfully. Finally, I found these VLP, or very low profile sticks of RAM that are only about 60% the height of regular RAM, which was perfect. So I ordered 32 gigs of it. I also picked up a 16-inch 120Hz QHD portable gaming monitor and a thin scissor key keyboard. These would both need some serious liposuction to make them thin enough, but that was a problem for future me. Finally, I grabbed a USB touchpad and a 300-watt Pico DC-to-DC power supply. This wasn't going to be enough power long-term, but it should be enough for testing, and by testing I mean seeing how close we can get to starting an electrical fire. With the essentials in hand, I figured it was a good idea to throw everything together and install Windows for a bit of testing, since I was about to massively violate the warranty of nearly every single component. The only real issue was with the power brick I was using, which was getting hotter than my mixtape. After swapping it for a much beefier DC power supply, it all seemed to be fine, so it was time for the real insanity to begin. Eyeing up my build, it was clear that I had a lot of work ahead of me to somehow shrink all of this down to fit inside the profile of a normal laptop. But I decided to pretend like I didn't notice any of that and just tackle it one part at a time, starting with the motherboard. After stripping it down, I removed the Wi-Fi card, followed by the VRAM heatsink. That just left us with 3 sets of ports that were too tall to fit: audio jacks, Ethernet, and some USB ports. Thankfully, we can find ways to use all of these things without the rear ports, so it was time to remove them. The right way to do things would be to desolder them, making for a clean removal. Sadly, my soldering iron simply wasn't up to the job, so now the right way to do things would be to buy a decent soldering gun, but local stores didn't have them in stock and I'm not a patient person. So we're gonna do things very much not the right way. For this method, we just need our poverty pry bar, the Vasectomizer 5000, and a set of lobster fingers. I'm 74% sure the warranty is void at this point, but after a while, we have a crime scene of parts and a motherboard that is looking much more lean. Now, I have to admit, I had no actual idea if you can just rip ports off of a motherboard and have it still function. It seemed like it would just appear to the motherboard as if nothing was plugged in, but I really didn't know, so I decided to hook everything back up and see if it would still boot. Come on. Come on. Okay, so I guess you can't just rip everything off of a motherboard and expect it to work. Alright, I guess I'll get another motherboard and maybe try desoldering and see if that works. Oh, wait. What? Dude! I obviously wouldn't do this if I didn't know it would work. That would be dumb. I was never worried. I did a quick check to make sure everything was still recognized, that network and sound all showed up in Device Manager, and everything seemed to be business as usual. So taking that as my thumbs up to continue, I moved on with the video card. Now, this guy obviously sticks up a lot when plugged into the motherboard, but with a PCIe adapter, I can place it on its side. However, if you compare the size of the GPU with a laptop, we still have a problem. But the actual card itself isn't that thick. We're mostly looking at heatsink and plastic, so I started to tear it down. And with everything gone, you can see that he really is just a little guy. This will work just fine, as long as we don't need to cool it, but that's another problem for future me. I'd really hate to be that guy. Around this time, I really wanted to start figuring out how to lay out the components, so I started designing the case. Looking at other laptops for inspiration, I noticed a trick that all of them use. Looking at a laptop like this from the side, it looks pretty thin, but that's really just smoke and mirrors. The narrow sides taper very quickly, so the actual bulk of the laptop is about twice as thick as the side profile suggests. I decided to use this trick to design the base, and after a lot of measurements and time in CAD, I had a design that I thought would work pretty well. It was far too big for my 3D printer, so I printed it in 4 different sections and carefully heat welded them together with a soldering iron. Now, this looked like it would work, and laying out all of the parts, it was starting to feel like this could actually come together. But if you've ever 3D printed something before, you might already be aware of a huge issue with this, and that is that 3D printed parts do not mix well with heat, and gaming PCs tend to produce quite a bit of heat. To solve this, I fell back on a trick. I applied a thin layer of JB Weld to the part, almost like paint. In the past, this has allowed parts that I've printed to withstand high temperatures for years without melting. So I gave the laptop base a solid coat. It needs some paint, but this should be fine structurally. So what's next? Well, we'll be laying out our heat pipes and heat sinks to design a custom cooling solution, stripping down the portable monitor to relocate components and design a lid to make everything much thinner, making a nice panel for the keyboard and touchpad, sorting out the rat's nest of wiring, making hinges for the LCD, painting and finishing, and, well, everything else. But this is where we leave off for now, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see how this loony bin of a project turns out. Thank you so much for watching.